Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Dr. Foley, roll call.
Good evening, President Reese and members of the governing board. Let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And if we can just keep the students, teachers, and family of the student that we lost yesterday in our thoughts and prayers, please. All right, we're going to go on to approval of the agenda. I move that we approve the agenda as it's presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Dr. Foley, the superintendent's report.
President Reese, members of the board, we begin tonight with our favorite part of the superintendent report, which is our acknowledgments of our points of pride. So tonight we're going to have two schools. We have two schools here. We'll start first with Chaparral and then with HTA. And what will happen is that our administration will come up to the front of the room and they will invite each individual who we're going to recognize up one at a time. And so when we have you come up, the administration will share about you, and then we will have a picture taken with you so that our governing board members will stand. They'll take a picture so that we can highlight you on the website as well. And this way we can honor and acknowledge you with careful mitigation strategies as well. So tonight we're going to start with Chaparral. We have the Sharks in the house, and we have Mrs. Hanson, Mr. Pepper, and Miss Day who are joining us to celebrate our amazing employee, student, and volunteer.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. It is a great honor to be here this evening to celebrate our Chaparral Points of Pride. All right, let us begin with a very special, they're all very special person, Mrs. Penny Montez. Come on up, Penny. All right, Mrs. Montez is currently teaching 4th grade English Language Arts and facilitates our Student Lighthouse team. She incorporates new learning into her instruction and inspires her students to be the best scholars and leaders they can be. Mrs. Montez is creative, hardworking, and devoted to our students. She goes the extra mile to make sure her students feel loved and are successful. In addition, she inspires students, teachers, and staff on our campus. We are proud to have you. Should we say who she brought with her tonight? Okay.
Sorry. They say your family makes you, so I brought my family with me. They are my support.
Thank you, Penny. Okay, next we have another very special guest this evening, and I would like to call up our student and Stugo President, Mr. Zach Zerlini. Zachary. All right, sir. We've got a surprise for you, too. All right. We figured you'd like chocolate over flowers. Okay. Mr. Zach Zerlini has been a student in our Shark Tank for 7 years now. Throughout his time at Chaparral, Zach has undergone numerous surgeries. As soon as he can, he returns to campus and is business as usual. Yes. He is currently our student government president and an upstanding Chaparral student leader, both on campus and off. Zach inspires students, teachers, and staff in our Shark Tank every single day. He comes to school with a smile on his face, and he is often seen encouraging and supporting his fellow Sharks. Zach is always thinking of ways to make sure all students are included, and he always sees the good in every situation. He is such an amazing, positive role model for many, and he has been showcased on Fox Sports for his work in the Miracle League of Arizona. You are truly a gem, Zach. We appreciate you. There we go.
Now, can you guys hear me? Okay, I brought my 3 other brothers and sisters and my mom and my dad.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. All right. And I have the honor of introducing our classified Points of Pride winner, Miss Emily Parker. We'll wait on that. We'll give it to her last. So Miss Parker has worn many hats on our campus over the past several years. She's been a crossing guard, lunch aide, paraprofessional, parent, and MC of our most recent Jingle Jog. She's dependable. She arrives on campus early to ensure that crossing signs are placed correctly. She steps into cover when extra supervision is needed without hesitation. This year, she has supported our students during support service learning. She supports our families with summer meals. She is super support on campus, and she goes above and beyond for our school at all times. So Miss Parker doesn't get flowers. I came in a couple months ago to a note on my desk that said, I wouldn't even need a stop sign while wearing these bad boys. So this one's for you. You can go ahead and open it up for us. Let's see what you got there. Neon coveralls for you. Thank you. Yeah, she'll be out tomorrow morning at Fry and Shap, so swing on by. You'll get to see the pants in action.
All right, one more. So our volunteer is Miss Fennell. Miss Fennell is part of our Shark Tank. She is one of our highly regarded and respected substitute teachers and parent volunteers. We have certainly utilized her this year for school. Miss Fennell is so positive. She's willing to take on any task, grade level, or job with a smile, and just has a positive attitude. Our teachers appreciate her flexibility and feel comfortable leaving students in her hands. We are lucky to have Miss Fennell in our Shark Tank.
And I apologize, I forgot Miss Parker's got her 3 children back there and her wonderful husband.
And I have my lovely 2 little girlies here who are proud Chaparral Sharks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we will now invite up Mrs. Bacon and Miss Garland.
We are so excited to be here tonight to honor 4 very special people that contribute endlessly to our campus. And so we're going to start with our teacher. Miss Garland's going to introduce.
Good evening. Tonight I would like to recognize Joanna Auclair as our certified representative for Points of Pride. Mrs. Auclair goes above and beyond to serve our students and staff at HTA. When we were presented with the opportunity to pivot with our instructional delivery processes and methods to accommodate online learning in the online learning environment last year, Mrs. Auclair stepped up to offer support to our staff and along with another teacher or leader on our campus. She quickly immersed herself in the Canvas online platform, attended professional development, and made herself ready to support our campus with training, troubleshooting, and support. For this, we are incredibly grateful to Joanna Auclair.
Thank you very much. I brought my husband, John, and my kindergartner, my HTA kindergartner, Decker.
Next, none of us ever thought we would be facing the pandemic that we're in right now, and health aides on our campuses are incredibly valuable. But this year, more than ever, they've had to step up and learn a new normal and work harder than they've ever worked before. So Kristen Ramos is our health aide at our school, and we are incredibly grateful for her. Come on up. She can often be seen running up and down the halls with her PPE on, but keeping us all safe. But wow, being a health aide in elementary school has never been easy, but this year it added a whole nother layer of complexity. Kristen takes care of each and every person on our campus with genuine love and support. She is detail-oriented and thorough and takes her responsibility very seriously. She takes time to answer all questions with dignity, patience, and respect. We are so lucky to have her as part of our family.
Okay. Tonight I brought with me my mom, my stepdad, and my husband, who are an amazing support system and always there for me.
Now I'd like to recognize our student representative, Caden Cleveland. Come on up, please. Caden is new to our school this year, and being a new student as a sixth grader is never easy, but that didn't stop Caden from becoming immediately involved and showing his teachers and his classmates all he has to offer. His teachers report that Caden consistently exceeds all their expectations, especially in math. He can often be seen helping other students who are in need. He is responsible and courteous, showing a great deal of respect for his peers and teachers. He shows great leadership, integrity, and accountability. We are so glad he chose HTA.
So I brought my mom, my dad, and my two little sisters, plus my grandma, who's basically my second mom.
And last but not least, this special lady on our campus has served us for many years, and it's nice to get the chance to recognize her. Melissa Shanis, would you come up? So this deserving parent has served our school. She was on our PTO board. And this year, she's continued to be of service, even though serving as a parent volunteer looks very, very different. Knowing that there's a strong desire for all students in the classroom to have their very own set of supplies to minimize the need for student staff to share those items, Melissa has been very generous in keeping our classroom teachers supplied with school supplies, books, emails with words of encouragement, Amazon deliveries from teacher wish list, and notes, special notes to show her appreciation. We are so grateful for her. We're going to have her introduce her family, her HTA family.
I brought with me my husband, Randy, my son, Vincent, who's a fifth grader, and my daughter, Vanessa, who's a third grader. And it's honestly because of them that I'm here. And I think it's really important to note that the kids have become the eyes and ears of these needs, and will come home and casually mention that they observed something. And so thank you very much for looking out for everyone.
We want to thank our Points of Pride, acknowledge our recipients in acknowledgement today. We always let you know at this point, you are welcome to stay if you would like, but we also know you have busy evenings and plans, so if you need to, we always say that you can leave at this time if you'd like. Thank you. Hello.
And then there is 5.
So President Reese, members of the board, to continue with the superintendent's report, you have up our upcoming events. I'd like to just take a moment and thank the governing board for the additional time and days you dedicated to learning together with us as a team in the month of January. We had, in addition to meetings, we had 2 Saturday trainings, and we appreciate you and your dedication to that time. And then, as you can see, we have several meetings coming up in the next few weeks here, and of course we're entering into a long weekend, and that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. We will go on to board comments. This time is set aside for any board members to share any events or make any acknowledgments. Mrs. Wilson?
President Reese, I just want to thank all the students who signed last Wednesday, I believe. We had a great signing and a great turnout of our student athletes to sign for college, and also Spelling Bee and Mrs. Richards and her great efforts to make the Spelling Bee happen for our kiddos. And some of those words, man, I cannot spell. So just thank you to the winner. Mrs. Richards would have to remind me what his name was, I'm not going to try to say it, but thank you. Thank you to those. Okay. But thank you to that winner and the runner-up. They were both great spellers, so thank you.
Anybody else? All right. We will go on to request to speak. Mrs. Reach, any requests? Okay. Then we'll go on to our consent agenda. I move that we approve our consent agenda as it is presented with 6.1 through 6.14.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding anything on our consent agenda? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
President Reese,
Mrs. Kaler?
I just want to say thank you to David Delgado, I'm not right, but he donated to Williamsfield a used kiln, and that's a very generous gift to the school. I also see that we got gifts from Maricopa County Health Department, but I look at those and think, those are necessary. I know they follow under our gifts, but shout out to Mr. Delgado. I can't say that word to save my life. So anyways, nice gift.
Perfect. Thank you for acknowledging that. All right, we're going to go on to our information items. 7.1, our M&O budget update and projection.
President Reese, members of the board, tonight the theme of tonight is a financial conversation, and as Mr. Gadd and as Mr. Moore prepared to present to you tonight, starting first with our M&O conversation for the third time, I just want to take a second and publicly thank these two gentlemen, the finance department and your executive team, who've been working really hard to deeply research, understand, put together information so that we can continue to understand where we are financially to make important decisions. And so these two gentlemen have been working really hard, and we have learned a lot with them and from them. And so again, tonight they have got additional information, and so we will turn the floor over to them.
Thank you, Dr. Foley. Madam President, members of the board, this is our third review of the operational budget for next year. We still have a couple things to update, but it basically is the same as we presented to you before. We are headed for the March 10th board meeting to ask you to approve some salary schedules and contracts so that we can commit the staff and new staff to Hickory School District. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Moore to go ahead and present the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Mr. Gadd. Good evening, President Reese, members of the board. Like Mr. Gadd mentioned, this is the third review of the M&O budget projections. So we'll make our way through. So the highlights page, a lot you'll see here is what we reviewed on the last board meeting. We do have a few updated highlights, starting with the first bullet point. Nothing has changed here. We have received the total of $3.2 million in COVID relief funds. That is as of today. We know that ESSER 2 is coming. We still have not received a dollar amount from that. We're estimating it at $2.6 million, but we are anticipating ADE, the Arizona Department of Education, to give us a dollar amount in about mid-February. So before that March 10th board meeting, we hope to have a hard dollar amount for that ESSER 2 relief fund. Bullet point 2, we have passed our 100th day ADM. That was on January 15th, and we have realized a little less than expected, so 117 ADM loss. As you know, before we were estimating about 150 student loss. So this is in our benefit, as you'll see as we progress through the slides this evening. And again, I want to emphasize that in fiscal year 22, we are budgeting at the same student count that we are utilizing right now. So any additional students that we bring into the district will be a benefit to the budget formula. So again, a very conservative number that we're using for fiscal year 22. Bullet point 3, we're estimating $3 million in reduction for funding for online learning. Again, this was not a decision based on funding when the board or Higley Unified made this decision, but this is just a factor of the formula and how the state is funded. We are monitoring potential legislation that will remove this 95% online funding and fund it at 100% for fiscal year 21. That would be a one-time legislation change, and we're monitoring that as it moves through legislation. Bullet point 4, we're implementing a phased plan to reduce the M&O to capital transfer, as we mentioned. And as you'll see as we progress through this slide, we have been budgeting a $4.4 million transfer from M&O to capital to pay down for that lease payment, that lease obligation payment that we are obligated to pay. Number 5, we are budgeting no increase to current employee benefits. This is more of just a notation that we are not putting, if there is any increase to benefits, we are not putting that on the employee for next year. So again, the COVID relief grant breakdown, not a lot of new information here. We're still waiting on ADE. You can see the 2 grants that we have recognized this year to date. $2.6 million from the Enrollment Stabilization Grant. That was from the governor's office. And we've recognized ESSER, I guess this would be ESSER 1 in the amount of $600,000. And again, we're still waiting on that ESSER 2 amount to be handed to us from ADE. So as we work through the projections, there's not a lot of new information here. I'm going to be pretty brief with this. This is the same numbers that we presented the last board meeting. I will highlight the online learning adjustment. We are still budgeting for that, even though there is legislation in place to possibly remove that. So that would be a benefit to our budget if that legislation passes in the tune of $3 million. So as we progress to the next page, you can see the transfer to capital reduction. Currently, in the June of last year, we budgeted $6 million for that capital transfer. We are only going to budget, or we're only budgeting in our revision, our May revision, a $4.4 million transfer. So that's $1.6 million that we can recognize in our current year budget. As you know, in school districts, we adopt a budget prior to the year in June, and then we do a May revision on actual numbers off 100th day ADM, and that's how the school district, that's how the budget functions in Arizona. So you can see the JBL difference there of $5.4 million. That is the difference in the adopted budgeted numbers that we presented in June, and then our revised numbers. So that's the difference between the $90 million that we adopted in June of last year, and then the revision that we plan on making in May. So fiscal year 22 or school year 22, again, we're budgeting at the ADM count at current year. So any increase to this, how this formula works, you would increase that weighted student count, and then you would take that by the base support level of the $4,400, and that would increase our base support level. So again, if we recognize any student growth in 22, that formula will be adjusted accordingly at the time we do a revision. One adjustment we have made since the last board meeting, we were budgeting for an inflation of 1%. The state has come out and notified us that it'll be about 1.2. So we have recognized that here in this formula. And there's also a state adjustment to the base support level. It was a function of the governor's budget in the tune of about $38 to the base support level. This was part of the 20 by 20 teacher state funding. So as we go to the next page, where that $5 million comes in play from the May revision is in that third line there, the budget balance carry forward. In that amount is that $5 million and our current year budget balance carry forward. That gives us the $13 million, and that's a 20% carry forward amount. That plays an important role in our estimated budget projections. As you work down the line there, you can see our estimated JBL, which is our total budget limit of $104 million. That number is significantly higher than our anticipated revised JBL that we're going to do in May. So that difference there is budget balance that the district can utilize as they see fit. That difference is now $8.6 million. We brought to you last board meeting difference. That's an increase of about $860,000. And a lot of that is due to that inflation number coming from 1 to 1.2 and the additional base support level increase from the 20 by 20 plan that's part of the state budget. So again, estimated fixed costs, nothing has changed here. We are estimating a 10% increase in insurance. That is a very very safe number from what our talks have been with MOM and our renewal rates. We have also budgeted a potential property casualty workers' comp change if that were to take place. We have set aside additional FTE and reclassification amounts in the tune of $500,000. And we are set aside transfers to stipends to clear up some of that 20 by 20 adjustment from classroom site fund to M&O. And then we also have a line there for projected salary increases. This will go through in the next page, but there's a total estimated fixed cost of $1.6 million that we can safely budget for next year. So this is the same projections that we brought to you before. This is a 1%, 3%, and 5% projected salary increase that we proposed using with that $8.6 million in budget balance carry forward. You'll notice here that we are still going to utilizing the 7.7 JBL difference. This is from the revision 2 budget projections. This is just to show, because those numbers aren't official yet, this is just to show how conservative these estimates are and how comfortable we are presenting these numbers. So if those numbers, when those numbers pass in the state legislature, we'll increase that 7.7 to 8.6, and you'll recognize that difference on that balance remaining. What we also talked about and that we're not recognizing is that potential ESSER 2 money that we have not recognized in here. Again, we're projecting at $2.6 million, but we have not received ADE's total dollar amount. That dollar amount would again be added to the bottom of these balance remaining amounts. So for example, if you were to approve a 1% increase at the March 10th meeting, you can take that $5.4 million would be our budget balance carry forward for next year, plus the potential ESSER 2. And then again, there's also the distance learning adjustment too. That's also potentially going to pass in legislature. So there's essentially $5.5 million in additional budget balance carry forward out there that we can add to these numbers. We're not putting this in there because that's not approved yet, but we just want to show you and kind of verbalize those numbers as we move through this budget process. Again, one thing I didn't mention at the last board meeting was supplementals are included in these dollar amounts. So I know Ms. Martins was looking at potentially increasing supplementals or taking a look at supplementals at that March 10th board meeting, in addition to the base support to our teachers, admin, and classified. With that, I think, Jeff, you want to touch on the calendar?
Yeah. The last page of the PowerPoint, and I might just, summarize what Mr. Moore has presented. The amount of money available, especially for salary increases, is very good because the district has not experienced a large decline in ADM, as some others have. So that's really helped us stabilize this subject. So we have the 1.1% from the inflation factor, stable ADM, and one of the big ones that has contributed to our ability to have as high as a 5% is that the COVID money continues to grow. We haven't even contemplated ESSER 3, which is, as you know, is in the U.S. Capitol in terms of, and we anticipate obviously that that's going to pass, and then how much districts get from that. So it just keeps getting larger and larger, and it allows us to be more comfortable with what's projected here. And so I just wanted to mention that. The March 10th, well, let me back up for a minute. The February 24th, I'm not sure if we can do that or not because we're waiting on clarity about ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. ESSER 2 could be here, and we'll know the dollar amount for our district. ESSER 3 will probably not be here, so we'll keep you updated on that. And so we may not do on February 24th the COVID grant just because of the uncertainty, although we are very optimistic that it's a fairly large sum. And the action item on March 10th is to move us ahead with getting in place contracts for next year and help with the recruiting function. So that's basically it. We will be discussing with you in the near future, probably starting on April 7th, some reflection of a possible bond election in the future. It has different parts to it, including the part that's related to the leases of 2 middle schools. That's also a part of that discussion. And then we will be potentially asking you for a approval of a call for a bond election on June the 9th. So we have time. We have April, May to discuss the bond and what we have contained within it, and plenty of time, I think, to answer any and all questions. And then our public hearing to finalize next year's budget is scheduled for June 23rd. So, Madam President, members of the board, that's the presentation on the M&O budget.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the M&O presentation? Thank you for being very thorough and letting us know we still have potential money coming, but we're not putting that in our budget yet. And so I can tell you what you've presented makes me a little more comfortable that you're watching out what's coming for our future, and that we potentially even have more coming that we're not even counting on, and that we're still being responsible and making sure that we have a cushion for whatever else may come our way. So thank you. With that, we'll go on to 7.2, which is our first review of the 2021-2022 capital outlay budget.
As a President, member of the board, this is the ongoing annual capital budget that all districts receive based upon ADM. It's it can generally be counted on as long as the state does not have severe budget problems, because you may recall that they have taken this budget down in the past to balance their own budget. And that final restoration of it, taking it back up, is scheduled for next fiscal year. And so far, it looks fairly good. The governor has included it in his budget for next year. No one is talking about the necessity to reduce their budget. Got a large rainy day fund. You know, things are fairly good so far at this point. So we have used that, and you'll see that in the highlights. We've used that backdrop to propose to you what we have here. This is a fairly detailed version of what we're intending to implement for next year. We will have it on the calendar for you. I think we are planning on April 7th to ask you for some tentative approval. And that tentative approval is just what it says. It's not final, it's tentative, we can change it. We wanted to accomplish a couple things. One is we wanted to get furniture and equipment on order, qualified to your final approval on June 9th. And we wanted to move forward with some capital projects that earlier we start, the more chance we have of having those improvements done by the start of the next school year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Moore, and he will present the PowerPoint to you.
All right, good evening, President Reese, members of the board. This budget's a little funner. This is actually like things and items, but it's a little easier and funner for some of our departments to take a look at, because we're actually talking about physical, tangible items that we're improving. So some of the highlights, like Jeff mentioned, we are the full restoration of the district additional assistance, which is essentially the capital budget, is expected to be finalized next year. So we'll be funded at our full capital amount, and I'll explain that as we move on. This budget, if we go to bullet point 2, has designated funding for curriculum and textbook adoptions, or adoption, I should say. Those are not cheap, and you'll see the dollar amount that we have allocated for that for fiscal year 22. Bullet point 3, this capital budget does reduce the budget balance carry forward. We do have a very healthy budget balance carry forward of $16 million that we're anticipating ending this year at. This does reduce it to $8.6 million. But you'll notice as we move through this, that amount, that 8.6, is 143% of our annual allocation. Our annual allocation is $6 million. So we're not depleting our capital fund. We're still very secure in our budget balance, and we have plenty of money to continue our capital plan over several years. Bullet point 4, this capital plan completes the 1-to-1 student-to-device ratio district-wide. IT, I believe, has a presentation coming up in a future board meeting that will go ahead and kind of outline how this plan has been completed. But just know there's funding in here to complete that plan next school year. Bullet point 5, this plan reduces the M&O transfer from 4.4 to 2.9 million. We've talked about that in the M&O budget. You'll see how that adjustment affects the capital budget in this next proceeding slides. Bullet point 6, this budget allows for the district to decentralize some of this furniture and equipment budgets down to the school level. This gives these schools more flexibility in determining what needs are greater for them. And really, like I said, decentralizes that budget down to the school level, giving them the power to purchase those items they see most needed. And the last bullet point there, we'll pursue any SFB and E-rate funding when applicable. This budget doesn't take into consideration any potential E-rate or SFB funding that may assist with some of these purchases and reduce our capital allocation or amount that we would expend towards some of these purchases. So with that, I'll provide a little context on the history and on our budget balance carry forward and how it got to where it is and where we plan on going. So you'll see in the slide, I provided the last 5 fiscal years of our ending budget balance in our capital budget. This fund has continued to grow exponentially. $24 million is 4 times the annual capital amount that this district would receive if fully funded. Granted, there was some years in there that were recession-based funding, so it was a reduction in funding, but you can see the budget balance continued to grow. If you look at the estimated 21-22 bullet point, this is where we are in this budget that we're presenting today. We are anticipating a $24 million ending balance at the end of the year, and you'll see how we plan on spending some of that down to end at approximately $16 million going into school year 2023. So again, we are planning on spending some of this money, but again, we're being fiscally responsible and not depleting this fund. $16 million, again, is almost 3 times our annual district additional assistance amount, so almost 3 times our annual capital budget. Page 4, this is going to be our guiding document here as we progress through the 2022 school year. If you follow along at the top, we'll go on the far left column, you'll see page number. So this document has several pages behind it that outline each one of these budgets. You can follow along as you see fit if you want to look at more research, and we'll go through that as we progress. The next column is our categories. These are our major categories that we identified. There's several subcategories in these, but for a capital presentation, these are the main points in which we'll be expending our capital budget from. Going to the right, you'll see our DAA. So this is what we're talking about. This is our capital district additional assistance budget. You'll see the bolded number at the bottom, the 24,960. That's our total budgeted amount that we plan on having for school year 2022. If you look right above that, you'll see the carry forward amount for 22-23. That's $8.6 million. We are setting aside a large carry forward to make sure this capital plan can be sustained for several years. We'll go into detail on some of these slides, but I just want to address a couple more funding sources. So you'll see adjacent ways there to the right of the DAA. We have a cash balance of $2.6 million in there. That fund has historically been set aside, I believe, for a legal purpose, but we have confirmed that we are clear of that, and we can utilize that as it sees fit for construction projects that have adjacent ways funding or adjacent ways pieces involved.
Mr. Tyler?
Yeah.
Wasn't the conversation of repaying the adjacent ways more like $4 million? Wasn't that the conversation before? Does anybody remember?
I'll let Mr. Gadd answer that.
We've had some conversations recently with the state, and as the board may be aware, the Auditor General provided a report to the Attorney General's office a few weeks back. Nothing has occurred that they're at least willing to talk about, but what they have said to me verbally is, if you have adjacent ways money, we think, and you have a need to spend it, we think you should proceed as long as the SFB board has approved it as an eligible adjacent ways expenditure. And that's required of all districts if the expenditure amount is above $50,000. So what they're telling me is, this is coming from several years back, as you probably know. They're telling me that we ought to proceed, and if there's any change to that position, then we'll deal with it. And so, they're saying, instead of counting your money every morning, basically, why don't you just proceed if you have a plan to spend it? And that's about as specific as they will get with that comment, but it kind of tells you, I think, that we're not going to likely experience a penalty with this. We have to remember, the basis of this money is property tax. It is not state aid. Okay? And so there's less interest, because the state does not have a chunk of this in order to have us give it back. So that's a difference as opposed to M&O or capital outlay. So I'm relatively confident, not totally, but relatively confident with the discussion I had that The district will be fine. They don't even said, we don't even know what the repayment method could be since it's property tax. You know, how do we even try to figure out who gets what, especially since it was levied 6-7 years ago? So the more you listen to that, the more you get the feeling that, you know, it's just not something that we want to try to deal with. Even if they did, I think that the district could probably show them that as a part of that construction amount, lease amount, there certainly was a lot of projects in there eligible for adjacent ways. And we would get the pay request from the contractor to show them that. If it gets to that point where we want proof that that money was spent on adjacent ways, I'm relatively sure we could provide that. So that's an update for you on that subject.
Then that last column there is our current bond. We are anticipating a budget balance of $3.6 million. Majority of that set aside for, there's a small bus purchase in there, and then you know, the potential if we have any major project needs, which we'll cover in these next slides. So again, we plan on having this as our guiding document for 2022, and then any expenditures we propose to bring to you from our capital plan, we will outline which budget this will come from, so you guys have a clear indication of what we're bringing to you and what we presented to you. So the first line, this is our kind of contingency amounts. You'll see a small amount for capital. Again, Mr. Gadd just went over the adjacent waste fund. This is we'll only touch this if we have eligible adjacent waste projects in fiscal year 22. Our current bond, we have a contingency amount of $1.8 million set aside. Again, we haven't identified any major projects for 22 yet, and we'll only touch that when we have a plan there. We have an unallocated amount of $1.5 million in capital. If we do not use this goes back to the budget balance, and again, ensures that we have sufficient capital funding for years to come. We do have a building lease obligation in there, as you all know, for $4.4 million, and that is funded from the capital budget. Like I mentioned in the highlights, the classroom technology budget has a $1.7 million allocation to complete that one-to-one student ratio. You can see the 4 schools there left remaining to get the one-to-one student devices. Within that technology budget, there's also district-wide technology. These are our annual software renewals, our licenses, Microsoft Office, our financial software. This does not include Canvas. We'll touch on Canvas a little later on. That's part of the education budget. Safety and security, there's a small amount there to start replacing some of our or adding new cameras to some of our schools. With the current climate, some of the break-ins, we hope this will help address some of those issues.
Can I ask which schools will be getting these?
I believe Dr. Fowler is working on a plan to identify those schools, but.
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, we have 3 schools right now currently that we're working on installing some cameras, ones that we've traditionally had some issues with, in fact, in the last few weeks. So that would be Cortina, Coronado, and Santan. But that budget actually allows for cameras, additional cameras at all of our campuses. And so I'm currently working on those 3 schools, by spring, soon on those 3. But then that budget would allow for additional cameras at all of our campuses. So, good question.
Thank you.
Support services, they're obviously a major part of our capital needs as a school district. We have $1.7 million set aside, both funded from our current capital and current bond. A lot of those repairs have been prioritized and outlined by Dr. Fowler's group. These bullet points are just a high-level estimate on some of those large projects. you can see roofing repairs for $400,000, HVAC, $320,000, and so on. Continuing with support services, we have outlined a $250,000 budget for school capital requests. These are requests that come directly from the schools. You can see the bullet points there and some of the high-level requests that we got, and we anticipate funding in '22. These projects are potentially saving, PTOs from going out and funding these projects. So that was our expectation here, to try to assist some of these schools and some of their capital needs projects. It's a small amount, but this is a start to helping address some of their capital needs. And below that, you'll see major projects. We have allocated $3 million from both the capital and current bond. This amount is just a set aside. We do not have any identified plans for this. Dr. Foley, do you want to?
President Kaler, members of the board, one of the things I wanted to add here, and as you recall, we had a work study back in October, November, where we have some important information coming to us. We have a demographic study from Rick Bramer and his group that's updated. We also have a facility index report that is being finalized, where we take a look at helping us prioritize what are those major projects. One of the things you will see coming to us soon, and again, you'll be getting background information on this, but come April, what we'll do is we'll have presentations for you based on what we've learned for them. Here's our growth in numbers and projections. Here are, if we were to pass a bond, what those priorities might be over the next several years. If we were not to pass a bond, what could we do, not do, considering multiple factors. So that what are those major projects and what do they look like and what that priority will be more information coming to you. But just know that at this point we're doing like a set aside, and then would have a more formal plan based on our demographic data, our facility index. In addition, you've been reading in your status reports about Dr. Fowler and Sherry Richards and David Lotzenhauser have been walking buildings with administrators, looking at every space on our campus. Where do we have room for growth or movement or space for us to make really informed decisions about any future growth or addition plans. So more information will be forthcoming. But again, this is just placeholder with knowing that we have been diligently working on background information so that when we get to the end up toward April, we can make some real formal finalized plans with what does this look like for us for the next several years.
Dr. Foley, thank you for that. I really appreciate this whole demographic thing that's coming our way, because I think it's really important that we base our spending on needs and not the wants. That I think in the past there have been some louder calls from different schools or departments or whatnot, but basically Higley is an older school district in some areas, and we need to look at those needs and not just the wants. So I'll be excited to hear those things in April.
Board Member Kaler, we are excited for that information too. So we'll have all of this come together as a comprehensive thing so that we can take a look at where is our potential growth, where are potential needs from a programmatic standpoint, and also where are our major project needs, because maintenance and ongoing care of facilities is an expense and something that we need to anticipate and have as part of our plan. And so those will be two big things that'll help inform what we're going to do and how we're going to prioritize those projects. And we're going to look at a multi-year plan so that we know what the priorities are. I mean, obviously, emergency things happen, but there would be contingency funds for this, but planning, long-term planning for us.
Dr. Foley, real quick. I'm assuming, because Dr. Fowler and his team have been extremely successful at getting things covered by SBF funds. And so I'm assuming, yes, we're going to budget for some of this, but we're not going to give up on that process, correct? And utilize what we can, where we can, and how we can get it, because you guys have been great on staying the course and getting us funds, and covering some of our older schools and repairs and items that otherwise we would have to pull out of here.
Yes.
President Reese, members of the board, yes, we're continuing to work very closely with the SFB, and we really just don't take no for an answer, and so we continue to battle and work and just point back to the when you drive by Santan and Coronado and notice the difference on those campuses. Now, to be fair, that took almost 2 years of jumping through hoops and, well, wait a minute, we won't replace that roof because it's metal. And it's like, well, you built it. And so, I mean, we just have to go through all these processes, and it does take time. And I think a lot of districts just give up, and we're not giving up. We'll continue to work hard and identify all of those areas. And they keep changing the rules. And so, okay, what's the new rule? We'll adjust. But really a credit to all of our staff and Mr. Buholtz and his team and the architects that we work with to really put that together, because it's a very methodical and sometimes frustrating process, because you hear no many times until you finally get the yes. But yeah, we're going to continue to work and hope that the funding remains there with the SFB as well. But appreciate that perspective. But we're just because we have some additional funds, that's not going to stop us from getting every possible cent that we can get from the state to help with those needs.
Perfect, thank you,
Madam
because there's
President.
no doubt that your team and everything they've done have helped continue to build this fund and has it where it is, and then we can shift. I'm not going to use the word pivot. We can shift those funds where they're needed elsewhere that we can't get covered. So again, thank you to your team who's saved our district a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that the perspective is SFB is maintenance. They're not square footage growth.
No, I was referring to, because we have chillers on here and roofing repairs, and
Yeah.
if we can get it covered, great. I'm glad we have contingencies, but I
One
don't
of
want to
the-
give up just because we have something here.
One of the reasons that you see that bullet point under major projects is the growth is going to need to be, if there is growth and we need to put additional classrooms on, it's going to be local funding. That is not what SFB is into. But by the same token, just what you said, is if you can save money in other sections of this capital budget through them paying for maintenance, it gives you more money to deal with in terms of enrollment growth. So it works out in the end.
Alrighty. Furniture, fixture, and equipment. This is what I talk about decentralizing this capital budget. We have estimated $492,000 being kind of pushed down to the school level. We're going to allocate this on an ADM basis, so it's equitable across the schools. Typical purchases from this budget include equipment, instructional materials, furniture. This also includes some PE equipment if they were to choose to replace physical education equipment. This is separate from sports, so this budget allows for that. An example of kind of how big this is for some of the schools. This is, take for example, Higley High School. They're currently getting a $3,000 capital budget. This would give them a 2,000% increase over their current capital budget. So I know, speaking to Mr. Fields, like he was very happy and elated to see this projection and proposal. So,
Mr. Moore, can I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
I see and hear and everything about, decentralizing. One, is there still oversight? And two, the benefit of centralized is if multiple schools need similar items, we can typically get a better price in bulk. So is there a process where we can still give the schools, here's your budget, and, kind of decentralize so they know more of what they need than anyone here, us, but with that, then if we have multiple needs at multiple schools or oversight, or if one school does need something and an extra school has extra of something because of how something was ordered, I mean, there's also ways to be fiscally responsible and save money. So is there some oversight there? Is there some help here?
Yeah, certainly. This process does not change the process in which we approve and how any of these purchases route through the appropriate departments. So any type of request that would come from, say, Higley would go through David, it would come through finance. So we would identify, okay, this school has put in a requisition for chairs, for example. Okay, Williamsfield has the same requisition in there or same need. Then we would research on how we can maybe bulk purchase those two. So there's steps in place to stop any type of, not waste, but like any excess purchase that may be better utilized as a bulk purchase. So there's steps in place there. And then, of course, this all routes through purchasing. So any type of procurement is all covered by review through us before it even becomes a purchase order. So there's processes and steps in place to monitor this budget, but then give them the ability and the freedom to kind of identify the needs at their campus. Because like you said, we do not understand their campus as good as they do.
Dr. Foley. President Reese, members of the board, one of the things too is that what this does is also help us be more equitable in what we're spending out of this budget for each school based on student need. Again, these things often were being purchased, but again, it was, you got a little bit for your school and then there was a overall arching district budget. This helps us be a little bit more equitable across the same approval processes in place. We know what they're ordering or what their needs are, and obviously we inventory and move things around. One of the interesting things we have found is doing walks, is walking through campuses and finding, oh, there's a whole lot of chairs here that might be important for us to know about and inventory and utilize as needed. So again, the processes, the procurement, the oversight doesn't go away. This is a more equitable way to ensure that all the schools have that amount of money from that budget being used for that purpose, because how they're using that funding has to fall within the rules of the fund it was allocated for. So it's more of a equitable spending of that budget rather than as at needed question. Obviously, keep in mind too, the district also would support if there was a new program or something different that was being added to a site, it would also come from our overarching budget. So again, this is just a different way of monitoring that and giving it back to the site for help, working with the district administration, of course.
Mrs. Kaler, did that answer your question?
I was just going to say, Dr. Foley, I think we were talking at one point that even Dr. Fowler had kind of gone through the schools and kind of put together some type of walkthrough of knowing of, oh, this carpet is getting older. And so that's also a working document that exists now that had not existed prior, correct?
Correct. And it'll be part of your major projects plan as far as a replenish, replace, and support. Yes. In addition to, the nice thing is we did our own version, and then we also have the facility index to confirm our version of it.
And this would just be items inside the school, correct? It would be like the items inside the school. It wouldn't be the building itselp,
correct.
Right? Okay, because I was thinking, I'm like, hold on. Nope. That's not really fair to HTA, who has been around forever.
No.
And then we have some new buildings, like they don't need to use their, okay. This is just the items within that school.
Correct.
Thank you.
And the last section there, the warehouse has a small allocation. They desperately need a new forklift. This will improve some of their efficiencies in which they can pull orders, receive goods, etc. They also have this is not your typical copy printer. This is a large printer to support our schools and their copy needs. They're going to replace one of the two. They have a color and a black and white. This is a phased approach, but again, these copiers are used for large print jobs. To help support the schools for some of their copy needs. Transportation, this one's pretty straightforward. The transportation has a current equipment upkeep budget of $40,000. This is to replace any, I put there, automotive engines, transmissions. $40,000 will probably pretty much take up an engine replacement, but you can see how this is just a small allocation to address some of those capital equipment needs in the transportation department. They do have on fiscal year 22 2 bus purchases. This is out of the current bond. This will replace 2 84-passenger buses in addition to the fleet there. They also have a white fleet allocation out of the capital budget. We have an aging white fleet. Some of our dump trucks, Dr. Fowler can attest, are costing us more to upkeep than it would be to replace. So this capital plan addresses that maintenance need there and to update our vehicle fleet. Educational services, we have identified there is no library budget currently. So for 22, we are proposing a $120,000 budget. This will be, again, allocated on an ADM basis. This is not an exhaustive amount, but this will help those librarians and schools replace some of those books, expand some of their library collection. And then as we move to a 1-to-1 student-to-device ratio, there are digital subscriptions that will be more beneficial to some of the schools rather than physical textbooks. So this budget does allow for those digital subscription purchases as the school sees fit. This again follows the same kind of plan, so there is oversight at the district level, but again, each school has their programs, their certain needs, so it does allow them to request a need based on their school, and then the district will make that purchase for them. Fine arts, we have heard loud and clear that there is a musical instrument inventory that is extremely outdated. This amount is a small amount, and again, we don't anticipate it being enough to catch us up, but we anticipate this being an annual amount to help replenish and replace that musical instrument inventory. This again has oversight at the district level, but it allows us to start to address those outdated musical instruments and replenish those to help our programs out.
I would like to just interrupt there for just a second. I want to thank Bob Edgar and all of our music educators in the district who last year worked really hard with the Conn-Selmer Institute to do an inventory of what we had to help us make a really good understanding of not only what we have, but the condition of it, to put together a replenish, replace, and additional plan. So it's a nice multi-year, because again, these are expensive, but again, you need to sustain it, maintain it, and continue to budget for it. So there is a nice plan that was put together by our educators in the district, led by Bob Edgar, who brought this in, and they worked together for PD hours to create this information, to put this together for us. So we really appreciate the work that our educators did to help us understand the extent of the need here, so that we can budget for it and begin to implement that plan, a multi-year plan to improve and sustain our collection and condition for our musical programs in this district.
And then lastly, the athletics. There's always been a district-level athletics budget, but we are keeping it the same amount as that fine arts there, just to maintain the equity across the board in terms of all our programs. And again, athletics, typically purchasing and replacing equipment, we've identified a few items there, but it really depends on what that school need is. So that school need will then bring the request to David. We'll have the oversight there on that, whether that need is necessary. He can leverage if another school has that product or equipment. Maybe we don't need to purchase this. So there is oversight too on this athletic budget. Lastly, this is like I mentioned, Canvas is a part of this educational service budget. The Achievement and Assessment team has a $310,000 capital budget. This is for Canvas, Synergy. This also covers our assessment and testing and student information software. The curriculum textbook adoption. This budget here, like we identified in the highlights, identifies a overarching $2.9 million fund to address our next curriculum or textbook adoption need. I believe Dr. Foley is working with the team to identify that need and put together a plan for fiscal year 22. And then lastly, the Higley Online Academy. We do have, and I believe Florida Virtual Learning was brought to the board last year for a district-wide fund. So that number you see there represents a student-based renewal fee. So that number is a lot smaller than I believe what was brought previously. So that is, we still plan on maintaining that platform with Florida Virtual, but that number will represent whatever the enrollment base is for Higley Virtual in school year 22.
Dr. Foley, would that be all students getting that, or just our Higley Virtual Academy kiddos getting that?
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, that would be as, we would not purchase this curriculum for everybody this year. One of the things that was important for us last year is that we needed, in establishing an AOI, we had to adopt a curriculum. We also wanted, because at the time when we had purchased it, we did not know how long we would be in, or if at any point we would need to return to. We needed to have access for everything, for anyone potentially to have access to the same library. Also, your initial cost is more expensive than a renewal. So it's kind of like you buy it and then you sustain it, but your first cost is a little bit more. And so because we have it, this number is a little bit less, but it would be that we would not put it for everybody who would have access to this library within Canvas. It would be only for those who are teaching online only, or for students who would be accessing it. Because again, now you'll notice Canvas will stay. Canvas will be a learning management system that is a way that we access what we learn and what we do, whether we're in person or online, but this would be the curriculum for the online students, and as needed per student. So it'll be a lot less each year than it would have been initially for everyone to have access to that library.
Are you guys getting feedback, formal feedback about the program and how it's working, and if they like it and feel like it's working for on the parents' perspective and the admin and teachers' perspective?
Yes, we've been receiving feedback, and we've had varied feedback from people depending upon how they've used it or not used it and their experience. And I think there's also between whether you're an elementary student or a secondary student, and how, just like anything, how it's being used. And so I think we've had some varied perspective. I think there are those who have had very positive experiences with it, and those who've had some negative experiences with it. And so what we've tried to do is take all of that feedback to improve upon the why and the what can we do to help improve the utilization for where there's been concern expressed, particularly as we transition from this kind of, as we remember talking about, this hybrid version, trial version of the online school to the full online school. Because this year, obviously, they stayed, as we talked about quite a bit, they stayed enrolled in their home school, and they were on, if they were online. Next year, what will happen is they'll transition into be actually enrolled into our online school.
And I'll let Mr. Gadd close this out and review our capital budget plan and our dates that we intend to bring that back to you.
Thank you, Tara. Madam President, members of the board, I'm on page 13 with the calendar that you also saw on the M&O budget. This subject of the capital budget will be back for a second review on March the 10th. And so we'll try to clarify, help understand whatever needs to be clarified by having you call us, let us know what you want us to give you more information on. The presentation itself will be very similar to the one you've seen. And then the important date here is April 7th. That date can move if we need to, but we would like to get furniture and equipment on order. We would like to get some capital projects started so that we can accomplish as much as possible over the summer before school starts. And that's why the April 7th date is there. We'll qualify all of the awards that you will make, all of the purchase orders we will prepare. If they're involved in next year's capital budget, they will be conditional upon final approval of the district's budget on June 23rd. So that kind of summarizes everything. And again, I want to emphasize one more time that if you need some more information about whatever the item might be in here, please let us know and we'll get it for you. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to stress, the team has worked really hard to pull together, what do we think we need? What are the potential costs? I mean, this was early even for our sites to say, what are some of those potential needs and costs and priorities so that we can begin to put figures together of what this could look like. So again, I just want to thank our entire team and our site administrators for their quick responses and work and time on helping collect some background information so that we can present this to you.
And Dr. Foley, I want to reiterate that for you, Mr. Gadd and Mr. Moore, Dr. Fowler, and the entire team that's working on this, I have to say, my entire time serving on this board, I have never seen more of a detailed, intentional budget. We have line items and budgeted for items we never have before. We have items budgeted for teachers and their classrooms. We have a budget for the schools and their needs, and we've never really had this level of detail whatsoever, and that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of thought. So while I've had a lot of questions, and Mr. Moore, you've been great, thank you, but I have never seen more intentional planning than what you have been presenting for both M&O and capital. So I so appreciate that, and I know our districts and our sites will also appreciate that as this is rolled out for them. So I know that it takes a lot of time and effort, especially when you're initially creating this. And Mr. Moore, I know that there is plenty in here. You've said, well, there's not currently a budget for that, so they're getting this, and there's not currently a budget for this, and now we have one. And would you say 2,000% of an increase for another budget? So, and this is what directly impacts our students. And you weren't wrong about our musical instruments when I saw an instrument literally fall apart on a field during a performance. So you're not wrong. We need to take care of that. So again, thank you. I know this has taken a lot of work, and I appreciate it, and it will go directly to our students. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Mr. Gadd, Mr. Moore, Dr. Foley regarding our capital?
I do, I'm sorry.
Mrs. Anderson?
Can you point to me where the classroom for like markers and paper and everything goes to per site and how that's divvied out? I've been there, and it hasn't been that much before. I didn't know where we're at now.
So this capital budget is so the items you just identified there are coming from a supply budget. Those would be in our M&O plan. I know what we presented is more salaries and benefits and an overall M&O budget. I have spoken to a few principals, and they have indicated the funding level is not, it does not meet their needs in terms of their supplies that they're needing to, whether it's a science resource room or et cetera, not just your general classroom needs, your specials. So we are reviewing that and looking to kind of revise that funding level to make sure it's adequate for them.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson?
Is the nurses' budget, would that come from the school allocation? Would that normally, I know sometimes our nurse needs, I don't know, Band-Aids, and I'm assuming this is more elementary, and I know it's not nurse, it's health aide. I'm sorry, I still call them a nurse. So is that coming from the school allocation budget? Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that would also be included
in
in
the discrepancy of the principal at that point. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
And I just think, sorry, one more. And I know that we're getting, it's confusing because of different language. We're getting COVID grants, and we have that kind of in our M&O. Has there been discussion or conversation, it kind of popped up in my head in the safety and security of looking at getting more cleaning materials or items, things like that. Safety is a different word now than it used to be. And we're receiving COVID relief grant money. And so is there COVID-related items that we would be looking, whether it would technically fall under equipment because we're looking at expanding what we currently have? Has there been some conversation with that?
Madam President, members of the board, you'll recall that we allocated to M&O the ESSER 2. ESSER 3 is going to be large, near as I can tell. And one of the things that we will be discussing with you at some point is how we use ESSER 3. And that could be a capital outlay focus if we need it to be. So we would benefit both M&O and capital outlay to roughly the same dollar amount potentially, so we can pick up momentum in both places. And especially as we talk with you about a potential bond election and how even COVID might relate to that, we'll be there to talk to you on April 7th about that subject. So in some ways, talking about COVID is not a lot of fun, but it is providing lots of resources to the district that we would not have had that not happened. And say that in this room only, but that's the situation we find ourselves in.
President Meese, members of the board, we've also talked about additional equipment as you've probably read in your status, when we've added additional sanitation guns. You've also, sanitation and staffing for that is a big issue. And so looking at the compensation for that or the addition of that or ability to attract and retain so that we can continue to provide that additional level of sanitation and cleanliness, because again, that is one of the things that as we evolve and emerge from this, that I do not see going away anytime soon in the near future. This is going to be a reality that we are going to have to plan for, staff for, and have materials and supplies. So yes, those conversations generally have been around sanitation. You saw in the budget, though, and read in your status report about the issue of, again, updating cameras to be something similar like we've used in transportation for the last several years, so that you can actually see, make out actual faces or bodies instead of fuzz on our security cameras. So that will be important.
Perfect, thank you.
And I can add, just in addition, like the PPE that the schools need and stuff, we have allocated budgets down to the school level for their need, but we also have a warehouse that's fully stocked with sanitation, PPE, masks. You saw the large donation from the Maricopa County. The warehouse is fully stocked. If schools are not aware, we have, if there is additional needs out there, we haven't heard of them. But if there is, like, we have all the supplies at the warehouse, and the schools have a budget too to purchase sanitary supplies for their unique needs, if there is that need there too. But I believe, from what I've heard, I haven't heard any additional needs coming, but if there is, we have the COVID ESSER 2 coming to address any PPE needs that the district may need.
Perfect, thank you. All right, no other questions, then we will move on to our action items. 8.1, I move that we approve the 2021-2022 contracts for certified teachers, certified non-teaching, psychologist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, physical therapist, administrator, classified administrator certified, classified exempt, and classified at will, with the notice of page 2 and the pay for performance on the administrator to read 3,500, not 6,000, which was in our initial proposal.
Second.
Questions? So this is approving our language for our contracts. These are not approving our contracts to go out. Ms. Martins, you want to kind of talk about what we've done a little bit different?
Certainly. Good evening, President Reese, members of the board. So as my tenure with the district, what we have traditionally done is brought to you the contracts in advance. That was a request, I think, that was made a couple years ago, so you had an opportunity to review the language first, and then we'll subsequently bring the actual renewals along with, as Mr. Gadd and Mr. Moore mentioned, the salary recommendation increases that will occur, and that'll be the March 10th meeting.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson?
Thank you for just having these done early. I appreciate them being done early and that we're not rushed at the end to try to fit everything in. So I just wanted to thank you for doing that and having it ready, Dr. Foley, and your whole staff, Mrs. Martins especially.
Thank you, Governing Board Member, Vice President Wilson. I apologize. I also want to make sure that I recognize the HR team because I know they've worked really hard these last couple of years on a lot of different things. Contracts is part of that process. And as President Reese, you mentioned earlier, as a team, Mr. Moore, Mr. Gadd, Dr. Foley, and Cabinet have all been very intentional about our process and where we're going. And that way it's in advance and you have full information laid out to you prior to making any voting decisions in that process. So.
And Ms. Martins, the contract now holds all the information, so we're not doing a contract and an addendum, is that correct?
That is correct. So upon the request of the board about this time last year, we were directed to look at changing our processes so that way the addendum wasn't something that was separate. So in working with the attorneys on this, we moved to add all of the language that had previously been in the addendum into the contracts. So you'll notice significant changes with our various administrative contracts to encompass that, where you don't notice as much changes with our other contracts because there was not an addendum that was separate.
President Reese.
Mrs. Anderson?
Outside of what you just mentioned, were there any other significant changes to the contracts that you just want to put on record or put out there?
No, not that I am aware of. Certainly one thing that we did add that our language didn't have prior to that related to our certified was information related to if results-based funding dollars didn't come through, or if they did come through, we would look to disperse that. The board has traditionally always done that in a separate action item, and we'll continue to do that, but we've added that language to the contract too, as well as if there's other funding that mechanisms that come through, we've added some of that language in relation to that too. So there's 3 things in specific to the certified teacher, as well as the other certified psychologist, occupational therapist, certified non-teaching, physical therapist, speech therapist. I think I've covered all the other educational professionals. That were things that we had historically been doing, just didn't lay it out in the contract. And like I said, results-based funding was one of them. And that was something new that started in the, if I remember correctly, either the 17-18 or 18-19 school year.
President Kaler, Member Anderson, I also believe, Mom, was there an addition about food? If food is provided, that it would not be a taxable.
Yes, Dr. Foley, thank you actually for mentioning that. I did not think of that as a significant difference, but that is true. I know that we have had challenges in the past when we've provided all-day training to our employees or all-day commitments to interviews or other types of committees, curriculum, et cetera, to where we've struggled and wanted to offer food and not always had the ability to get sponsorship from various vendors. So now with this added language, if we do have a full-day training, again, minimal, but we would be able to feed our employees that are participating in those things, which we think is the right thing to do if we're going to ask for the commitment of their time for that. So all of our contracts have that language in that now, yes.
We don't tax you for your cookie.
Thank you, Ms. Martins. Any other questions regarding our contract language? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. All right, we are now on to our future agenda items. You can see we have technology update and liability insurance and plan reviews coming up, as well as our budgets. Now, I know our new board members on the 24th. We will take care of board business. It will be pretty short, pretty much, unless something else comes up. It's just our agenda and our consent, and then we do our work study. So while with COVID, we've kind of stayed in this setting. It is a little more back and forth questions, the presentation. So we have our work study with taking care of board business on the 24th, which is going to be a lot of good information. So is there any other items we want to add? Mrs. Kaler?
President Reese. I'm kind of interested in, and this is no rush by any means, but just our world language programs. I would just love an update on our immersion programs, costs associated with our immersion programs, how their enrollment's going, just kind of an informational update, just whenever time permits. Again, no rush, but I think it's been a few years since we've had a full comprehensive view of them, so I would love to hear.
President Reese, Board Member Kaler, we would be excited to do that. So obviously, we will get something to you. That was something that a lot of work went into and then was interrupted a little bit by COVID crisis management. But there is lots on the front of our immersion programs that we would be excited to highlight and share about where we've been, where we're going, and some of the unique work that's being done, as well as a world language overview.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson.
How about an emergency protocol meeting at some point? Again, pretty far out because I know COVID has kind of changed everything, but just going over our emergency protocols, especially for our new board members, probably even for me because I know things have changed and we can now have an executive session.
We can always have an executive session, and I was just going to say, we
Yes,
would have to
on that.
plan
It
that as
might
an
have-
executive
yes,
session
it may
to
have to be
review our
planned as an
emergency
executive.
protocols. We do not discuss our emergency protocols in
Right.
public.
So that's what I was thinking. I know we discussed it at our Saturday training, that was something that might be a good idea to refresh us. So thank you.
Anything else? All right. With that said, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Have a good night. Meeting's adjourned.
You did an excellent